This is Off Track. Welcome to the Tuesday episode of Off Track with Hinch or Rossi. And we're starting it off with a lot of swear words because Tim's up against it time-wise to get this released in time. So
I have 7 hours and 56 minutes.
Which... Doug, that sounds like a lot of time. That sounds like a lot of time.
It's an eternity. It's fine. He just needs to not sleep.
Right.
Or parent.
She's sick.
Cool.
She's put her to bed and you're fine. Like, isn't that how it works?
She's also the grown-up in the house. So
that's fair. She
Great
is sick.
point.
I don't know if you know this, James, because you're not a parent. Doug can really... It's actually not less work when your child is sick. It's significantly more work.
Now, look, not... I mean this.
I'm kidding.
In like
I played like 4 hours of Zelda today.
Which in your defense is 2 hours less than you would have if she was healthy.
Yeah, that's true. She's hogging
but Becky's
the controller.
sick. I get it. It's more work when they're sick. I totally understand. Yes, neither here nor there. We're going to have to swear a little bit because our guest today does something really cool. And I love space. And anybody that knows this, knows anything about me, listens to the show, knows that I've been to space camp. I've been to Space Academy. If I had a bigger brain, I would have loved to have been an astronaut. But we are joined by Doug Ellison, who is is it the chief of the Curiosity rover? What's the official title?
The best description I've heard is Mars Rover crew chief for Curiosity.
Crew chief, perfect. That is totally relatable to our audience.
Yeah.
I love that. So you are in charge of the Curiosity rover that is on Mars.
He drives a taxi on Mars.
Yeah, it's Uber for scientists. But I manage a team of about 16 or so people, and we do all of the science planning. We have about 10 people who are literally rover drivers who decide how to get the rover to where the scientists want it to get to. And 3 times a week, we all get together, write a whole bunch of commands and yeet them up to the rover and keep on trundling along.
Yeet them up. Now, question, how does one apply to be a driver for the Mars rover? We're going to get to you in a minute, but I want to know how I can benefit from this.
We've had like the most diverse we've had someone who was like a meteorology major. We've had geology majors. We've had a lot of computer scientists, because while we'd love to sit there with like a joystick and a big TV, driving a Mars rover is really like writing about 100 lines, 500 lines of computer code. You're giving it like instructions, and it's like, hey, turn this direction, drive this way. If the suspension gets a bit too much out of where we think it's going to be, stop. That's probably a bad thing. If you have too much of a kind of a tilt, stop. It's probably a bad thing. And we give it little waypoints, and it tries to measure its own progress as it goes. And then we bundle that up with all the other instructions, like, take pictures over here, get the robotic arm out, and play scratch and sniff with that rock right there, and what have you. But it's also about 18 months of training. And we slowly give people more and more sets of keys. So they start off doing every day. They'll check, is the rover stable enough to get the robotic arm out if we want to look at the rocks in front of us? And then they'll design the drives, and then we'll let them use the robotic arm. And we slowly over the months train them. Because there's no way you can go to learn this stuff. Like, we're the only place in town that does this. So we start from zero and train from basically nothing.
Yeah, not a Mars Rover driving academy anywhere in California.
And you can't. It's not like you can, like you said. It's not like you can have an iRacing setup where you're steering it, because Mars is 4 to 5 light minutes away, so it takes 4.3 minutes for the signal to get there, and 4.3
at the
to
best.
Get back.
At the very closest, it's 4 minutes. When Mars and Earth are on opposite sides of the solar system, it's like 20 or so minutes.
Wow.
And so, like, imagine a situation like you're sat, like, ready to do a quali run at Indy, right? You put it into first, dump the clutch, and nothing happens for 45 minutes. And then
that has happened to James a few times.
Too soon?
Just the one. It's always too soon, Doug. Always too soon.
And then the view outside the window starts updating. But at that point, like, you've gone through the stand and you're in like the rental return lot at the airport, right? Like, it's
right.
And so we give the rover 2 to 3, sometimes 4 days of stuff all at once in like one basically glorified email that we send to the rover in one go. And then we get the data back as like these lumps that come through the satellites that we use for doing science, but also the Atlas Relay satellites as well. So we get 2, 3, sometimes 4 dumps of data every day that tell us, how the drive went, where are we now, all the science measurements that we've taken. And then the data that comes down, we turn that into like a 3D model of the terrain in a game engine. Looks like, like some sort of computer game, but we simulate the rover's next bunch of activities on that terrain. Hazel does it probably better than most of the rover drivers, frankly, because she's tried it. And that's how we plan the next drive, is on that 3D terrain. And so we drive as far as we can see, or where the scientists want to get to, and we do it again and again. We've done it 4,500 times, and we're still trucking.
I have so many questions. Okay, so I'm gonna start with, so to that end, like, you give it a command, you send it. I assume every time it moves, somebody's watching, right? Somebody's watching that screen, or no?
No. So we get the data down. Imagine someone like takes a flight somewhere, and then you're waiting for an email with a bunch of their holiday photos all at once. Like, you don't get to hear, like, how was baggage collection? How was the hotel? It's just, here's all my holiday snaps. What do you want me to do next? All in one go.
So that means that when you're eventually watching the video file that it sends of the path that it's gone down, if something were to have gone wrong, like, there's no way to stop it. Like, you give it the command and you build in certain parameters, if X then Y, to try to stop it from doing something bad. But like, it could fall into a sinkhole. It could do something without really, because there's no way to just abort the movement.
I'm not saying we've driven a priceless national asset into a small trap of sand, thus ending it, but that's a thing that could happen. So literally, you can't like interject, right? You can't interject in real time. Like the Spirit rover back in 2009, 2010, on the older, smaller solar-powered rovers, it was literally trundling along, and the terrain looked beautifully flat and smooth. And it broke through a crust into like incredibly fluffy light dust, and it never got out. That's where it ended its days. And we make the rovers.
James has also had qualifying runs like that.
Yeah. Again, too soon.
It's true.
We can make the rover be kind of timid or brave. We can turn up and down those checks of like, we think the terrain's going to be this rough, right? If it's more rough than that, you're probably not doing what we expected. So just call the halt to proceedings, park up there, take all the pictures that document where you are, and then we'll figure out where you're going to go next. So it'll just throw its hands up and say, I'm out of family with what I was expecting here. Tell me what to do next. And then we'll come in, the next day, figure it out and decide where it's going to go next.
You keep referring to, sending it where the scientists want it to go. Are you not a scientist? You seem very science oriented, but maybe you're more an engineer. Like, how do we differentiate what you are versus what a quote unquote scientist is?
It's what's really cool is that you could hang out with a bunch of the Curiosity team, a mix of like several hundred scientists or like the 100 or so engineers responsible for keeping it safe and telling it what to do. And you might not be able to tell the difference because I'm on the engineering side and we care so much about the science that we do. We learn a lot about it. Our project scientist gives us like these weekly updates on what we're finding, what we're learning. And so it's absolutely a fuzzy area in between. My background is very, very unconventional. I come from a multimedia design background. I was in data visualization here at JPL for like 5 years. Then a virtual reality lab that was figuring out new ways to operate Mars missions with like Microsoft HoloLens and stuff like that. And then I moved into mission operations in 2016. And that's not the least conventional pathway to doing Mars rovers that I've seen. Is people doing even crazier stuff than that. So it's definitely an engineering discipline. Where I am now, it's more of a human factors discipline.
Yeah.
It's keeping the team like fed and watered and working with like their management, working with our science team, our engineering team, making sure everyone's got everything they need. But I couldn't, like when I took over as a crew chief, I refused to like put all the tools down. So I still do tactical shifts operating the cameras on Curiosity as well.
Doug, we've been friends for a while. I could talk to you about this stuff ad nauseum, but just to bring it around to racing, because obviously we met through racing stuff, and then I've been leeching off of you for astronomy stuff. Do you guys see an overlap in terms of like the kind of emotional bond you form to these inanimate objects? I mean, like Alex calls his car baby girl. I saw you in the documentary Goodnight Oppie talking about like how you feel like connected to these pieces of machinery, and I'm wondering if there's some overlap there with you in the race car, James, and Doug with his space taxis.
We went through hell when we lost the Opportunity rover. I was also on the Opportunity mission, and the end of that mission was was brutal. But almost nobody who was there at the end of that mission, still working on it, had ever seen the rover. We'd never seen it, right? We joined the project years after it left Earth. And when you really boil it down, it's not that we're sad that there's 400 pounds of metal on Mars has stopped working. What's really sad is that as a team, we wouldn't get to work together anymore to make that rover do the cool, right? That's what we are really going to say goodbye to, is that. And so I don't know if it's the same, like you leave a team. What's sad is you're saying goodbye to that whole team. Sure, you're going to go to the new thing. It's uncertain. Maybe it's not as an awesome a team. Maybe it's not as rewarding. Maybe it's not as satisfying. And so it's that sadness of, we did this cool thing together and I don't get to do it together with these people anymore.
So when that one was lost, what was obviously the goal was not for it to get lost. So like how far along were you in the planning for the next rover? And
Opportunity got lost significantly longer than it after it was supposed to.
It was designed to last 90 days.
Right.
It lasted for 5,111.
Not a bad ROI.
It's, you know what? Yeah. Here's the thing. It cost about, it was $850 million to build those two rovers that landed in 2004. By the end, another $12 million a year.
Or half of Max's car.
Yeah, right? It's not a lot. And so we lost opportunity in 2018. Curiosity had already been trucking for 6 years, and most of the people were already working on both rovers. We were lucky in that a lot of people who were working Opportunity, we could just go straight into working on Curiosity, and a lot of people went into getting ready for Perseverance, which is the very newest rover that's kind of on the other side of Mars, going around collecting rocks.
Yeah, and that was kind of my question, is how much of that team from Opportunity just transferred over? So even though, you lose that one and that sort of fun stuff that you're doing, but I would have thought that a lot of them probably immediately transferred over to the next one, and you could kind of continue that relationship.
Absolutely. It was probably half of the team on any given day for Curiosity today worked on Spirit and Opportunity at some point. It's a lot of the same people.
Okay, so you talked a little bit about your path, but what did you take in school, for example? And was the great beyond what you kind of always aspired to do professionally, or how did you start? I mean, we kind of heard the progression, but kind of walk us through what you did in school, what the original goal was, and then sort of the path that led you there.
So my office is between two people who worked on Mars Pathfinder and the Sojourner rover, the little rover from 1997, right? Size of a microwave oven. I've got two colleagues right here who worked on that mission. And I was starting college the summer that thing landed. And I was like, I'm going to go do electronic engineering. I want to do space stuff. I want to do that. And I sucked at it and I quit. And I was like, I'm no engineering, math, arg, scream, help. And I dropped out and went and did a 3-year BA in multimedia design. Okay. Now, to be fair, I had a blast. It was amazing. And I was doing a lot of the stuff I would do would be space stuff, right? It was taking data from space missions, making it look cool, doing animations of missions for fun and stuff like that. Eventually, when Spirit and Opportunity landed, as a fan from the outside, I was playing with all the raw imagery that they were putting online for people to kind of feel like they're a part of the mission. All the images go straight online for people to follow along. And that's what happened with Curiosity, images that I wrote sequences on Friday that took pictures over the weekend that were on the web before I saw them, because it's an automatic pipeline. It's amazing.
It's government. It's our pictures. We paid for it. They're ours.
You should be able to see them, right? And I was playing with this stuff as an amateur on the outside, and eventually some folks at JPL said, "Hey, come and we're doing this conference about education and public outreach. Do you want to come and talk about what amateurs do with all this data?" And I got to know a bunch of people at JPL, and I was working as a multimedia producer for a medical training company for nearly 10 years back in the UK. And they said, "Hey, we could really use someone like you to do the multimedia, you understand the graphics stuff, you understand the spacey stuff. Could you come help us with these projects we're working on?" One of which was the Curiosity landing animation that people know as the 7 Minutes of Terror. And a bunch of really cool projects: Eyes on the Solar System, Eyes on the Earth, DSN Now, which lets you see which spacecraft we're talking to at any time. Loads of cool projects. And so I moved from the UK to Pasadena in 2010 to start working at JPL. And then it was 5 years of that kind of data visualization stuff. It was absolutely awesome. Moved into research in virtual reality to try to improve mission operations. Got to make a holographic capture of Buzz Aldrin and put him in a HoloLens and let people walk on Mars with Buzz, which is kind of cool. And then someone...
Can we do other things with Buzz? Can I put him in GTA 4, for example?
You have to ask Microsoft, because they have holographic Buzz.
I just, it feels like a missed opportunity that I can't have a Buzz Aldrin character on Fortnite.
What's funny is that when we went up to Redmond to film him, Microsoft paid to have a beautiful replica of like his Apollo jacket, like that beautiful blue, sexy space nerd jacket made, right? No one said sexy in that context before. Anyway, and the production team said, if Buzz doesn't want it, you can have it. And some wanted it, so I didn't get to keep it. But I wore it.
Look, I've been saying this. I've been saying this for years. Buzz Aldrin's everybody. No, I'm kidding. By the way, he's a national hero. Just so we're clear, Buzz Aldrin, second man to walk on the moon, is a national hero.
And the good thing is, he's not bitter about being second at all.
No, not even a little bit. No, I handled that like a champ. Like a champ.
Beautiful. Yeah. And so then it's like close family friends who worked on Curiosity said, "Hey, I think you could do mission operations. Come train on Curiosity." So I started training on the cameras on Curiosity. Then took over as the engineering camera team lead, and then the planning team chief about 3 years ago. Yeah, it's a very weird career path.
Yeah, but I feel like it's one of those industries that there's not necessarily a super direct line to, and certainly there wasn't. Maybe it's better now, kind of like motorsports, right? Like we get people asking all the time, "Hey, I want to get involved in racing. How do I do it?" It's like, I don't know, man. Like there's a lot of different ways if you go up and down the paddock on how to get there. But
drive fast, be lucky. I mean, it's, yeah, right.
So where does the motorsports passion come from? Because, you know, you're a fan of racing. I assume that's been a thing for a while. Obviously coming from the UK, bit more motorsports friendly. Don't say it's had anything to do with him.
No, he's pointing at the picture behind him.
I'm not pointing at Tim the degenerate. No, we're talking about...
Oh, yeah, there's a race car behind you.
Professional full-time mustache wearer Nigel Mansell. So,
my guy. Red 5, baby.
So I was, my dad and I went to see like club racing at Alton Park when I was a kid. I was at the British Grand Prix in 91, 92. I was part of the track invasion. I saw the Lap of the Gods Senna at Donington Park in 93. I was at the bottom of the Craner Curves and saw it, and then went home with trench foot. It was so wet that day. So I've always been a big motor racing fan. It's like so many. It's like I used to watch this stuff with my family, and I got into IndyCar because when professional mustache wearer Nigel Mansell, left F1 in 92 and came over to Indy, that's, where all of my American geography came from, watching it on ITV in the UK. Right. And so when I would like tune in and out of IndyCar because the coverage back in the UK in the 90s wasn't great. But was like watching Mark Blundell and stuff like that. And then when I moved over here in 2010, I'm like, well, Long Beach is right there. And so started going to Long Beach, and then it really went into overdrive in the pandemic because someone you know very well, Steph Wilson, was racing in that 500 race they had on NBCSN. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'll paint you a livery because I've got the Photoshop skills. I've also done a lot of iRacing. And so I made him a livery, and Steph and I have hung out from time to time ever since. I've not been to the 500, but I have been to qualifying weekend a couple of times. And I'm going to make it out to the 500 at some point. But yeah, like it's the same reason I love the space stuff. It's that combination of human factors and really freaking cool engineering all at once. Like it's these machines, be it like 2,000 pounds of Mars Rover or 1,500 pounds of IndyCar. Like it's extreme engineering. It's the limits of what we're capable of making. And that's awesome. That's awesome.
And limits of what humans are capable of being subjected to, right? Like I wonder if there's something to that, because I know a lot of drivers are big space nerds, and there's a lot of parallels in a lot of ways. I seem to be fascinated with things that are humans doing things they shouldn't be doing. Like humans shouldn't be going 220 miles an hour. That's not what we were built for. We should not be going into space. We were not built for that environment. I love scuba diving. We don't belong 100 feet under the surface of the ocean. That's not where we belong. I have this weird fascination for things we really shouldn't be doing, which doesn't say a lot about me, I think, as a person. But no, I love that. I love that connection. So you've had a livery in the Indy 500.
Yeah, in the virtual on NBCS 500. Yeah, it was great. Actually, I hid something right behind like the kind of the fairings right in front of the rear wheels, right tucked in there. I hid some graffiti that you couldn't see, but it was in there. It was in there.
Are you going to share what it said?
No, so there's a joke here at JPL. So we have something called the dark room. It's the bit of JPL that looks like a mission control, but it's actually just the world's sexiest switchboard. Like, it controls the deep space network. The dishes are around the globe. The data comes down. That place
the center
gets
of the universe.
Out. It's the center of the universe, right? And I was up at Goldstone, which is where some of these radio dishes are, many, many years ago, and we all took photos of each other in front of this 70-meter wide radio dish. And I set my camera going, ran up to the bottom of the dish, and I just stood there like this, with like a big kind of hands up like this. And I sent all those photos to the guy who runs that room and said, hey, Jim, if these are any use, you can use them. He always has slideshows of the dishes at the front of the room. And he took that one picture with me sticking my hands up like an idiot, the big picture of the dish, and then cropped me out, blew me up, and just put Doug underneath it. And so people go and see the dark room, right? They're like, who's Doug? Oh, it's Doug, right? And so for a while, my email signature just said Doug, and then it was like /0 / kind of thing, like just doing that as an emoji.
Yeah.
And so I hit that in Steph's car.
That's awesome. That's too funny. I love the little hidden thing. We should do that in a real race car. I like that. I assume there's stuff like that on the Rover too. There's got to be somebody like signed it or said Doug was here. You know,
can we tell the story about the treads, or is that
yeah, we can. Yeah.
Topic?
So
okay.
So when the Spirit and Opportunity rovers landed, NASA headquarters. So JPL is like the overachieving brat of the NASA family, right? And NASA headquarters sometimes gets a bit of, for God's sake, what have they done now? The very first picture that Spirit and Opportunity took, it literally, like, JPL was written right there, right? And like, it's a NASA mission, guys. It's not. It's one big family, right? All working on this together. So, like, won't do it again. Are bad. When we built the prototype wheels for Curiosity, they're like 21-inch, like, machined from one solid piece of aluminum. They're amazing. And they have these angular grousers that go all the way around. And then once a revolution, it said JPL, like in like italics that matched the grousers. And they're like, don't worry, but this isn't what's going to fly on the rover. We're going to have these holes so that it leaves a unique footprint, and we can measure how fast the rover is driving and all that good stuff. It's not going to say JPL on it. It wasn't until a member of the public spotted in pictures posted to the Kennedy Space Center website when the rover was getting ready to be bolted to its rocket that someone went, are those holes spelling JPL in Morse code?
No.
And so every 1.5 meters, right, as we drive, we write JPL in Morse code on the ground. And it was too late to do anything about it. And so, it
was by a bit. Yeah. That's
And
awesome.
so, it's a once every revolution, thousands and thousands of times, right? 32 kilometers worth of every 1.5 meters JPL. Like that.
Scoundrel behavior, and I love it. I'm here for it. Before we let you get back to work, we really appreciate you taking the time. I love that you're doing this from your office, which you said before we started recording. You literally could not turn your camera left or right without me having to leave the room.
I have cat drawings of the rover over there. Yeah.
Right. And as a dirty foreigner, I'm not allowed to see these secrets. It's so funny. So, as you know, for a long time, a lot of the straight line testing that IndyCar teams would do would be at Kennedy, right? They'd use the shuttle runway. And as a driver, if I'm being totally honest, and you can poll the audience on this, straight line testing is the worst thing for a driver. It's you're literally just accelerating up to like 200 miles an hour, turning around, coming back. Sounds exciting, but when you're doing like 60 runs a day, it does get a bit monotonous. You're not doing any turning. Tedious. You're not right. It's a little tedious. So, it's, again, a lot of people would give their, left arm to get to drive an IndyCar, even in a straight line. For drivers, it's a very difficult task. 11 years in IndyCar, never once had to do a straight line test because I was not allowed on the property as a Canadian. So all my teammates hated me because I couldn't share the load.
Safer.
I just had to.
I personally, as an American, feel safer knowing that James Hinchcliffe wasn't allowed there.
And look, I feel more rested and relaxed than any of my teammates, so I wasn't complaining. Even though the irony was, I was the space nerd. I would have signed up for every single one of those days just to be there, and they wouldn't let me. And all of my teammates were like, "I don't want to go. Let Hinch do it." Couldn't do it. What's next for Mars Rover technology and missions?
So Curiosity is still plodding along. We're lucky in that we have a bunch of like two big analytical laboratories in the rover. And so we've spent the last 12 years climbing up into the foothills of a mountain the size of Mount Whitney, in which like layer by layer is recorded what Mars was once like. The ancient, long time ago, billions of years ago, Mars was warm. It was wet. It was a lot like the Earth. We've seen evidence that there were lakes that were coming and going. We've seen ripples fossilized in rocks. We've seen all the ingredients life needs. We know it was a habitable environment. As we climb up the rocks from where we are now, it's how did that habitability persist? How did it end? What was it like as the last vestiges of like the warmer, more pleasant, habitable Mars turned into the nearly airless, dry, freezing cold hellhole it is today? And that's the story we're picking apart kind of step by step as we keep climbing up these hills. For our sister rover Perseverance on the other side of the planet, they are collecting an incredible set of samples of rocks. So that mission is basically conceding, if you think about the Apollo astronauts, right? A couple of 100 pounds of rocks that they've brought back. The best science being done with those samples that have been on Earth 50 plus years is being done today with instruments that no one could have even imagined in 1969, right? And so we're like, we've put some amazing instruments on Mars. The best instruments are always going to be here. We need to get those samples back to the Earth. And so I've got a sample tube right here, 3D printed.
Am I allowed to see this one?
You can see this. Anyone can download this from the NASA website, actually, and 3D print their very own Mars 2020 sample tube. This is life size.
Okay.
We've been collecting a couple of dozen of these of a bunch of different rock types in a not dissimilar landing site. It's a big crater with an old river channel that's flown into it. So the floor of the crater, the front of the river delta, the channel, some really enticing and interesting signatures that have been found in those rocks. The challenge now is, how do we put together kind of a sustainable and affordable program to get them home? Right. And so we've reached out to industry, all the kind of the new commercial space companies, JPL itself, other NASA centers are trying to come together and figure out what's the best way to get a couple of dozen of these back down to Earth again. So we can
James and I volunteered to pick them up.
I suggested just putting them on a big string and then you just pull them back, but apparently they don't make them long enough. So
sitting on a gold mine, great opportunity there. It's a business that we can get into. We'll talk about that later. That's so fast. Okay, so I lied. There's a little sub question out of that. What's the most surprising thing that we've learned? I mean, we obviously had ideas about Mars, theories about Mars. I'm sure a lot of it you were able to decipher, without specifics and details necessarily. But what's like the biggest surprise that you guys have discovered?
There's two. I'm going to top and tail the Curiosity mission to date. One is where we landed by measuring the shape and the size of the little pebbles that were stuck inside sedimentary rock. It looked like a beaten up paving slab, right? The size, the shape, the composition of the rock they were sat in. We now know for a fact that where we landed used to be a river channel with water between ankle and waist deep, so clean you could probably have drunk it. That's wild.
That is
because
insane.
Right now, because now like
it's
we
insane that you can also tell that from some broken up rock.
The scientists are kind of super big brain, and given that Mars now, like in the morning, we will especially when it's local winter for the rover, we will spend like an hour heating our cameras up to minus 55 centigrade to get them warm enough to use. Like Mars is freezing, and yet once beautiful river. So we figured that story out, and what we found about 6 months ago, and we did a lovely 360 video about this that literally dropped this week on the JPL YouTube channel. We were driving up this old channel and cut into the side of the mountain, and we turn a corner, and there's this about the size of a tennis court, little sandy dark slope with these white rocks on it. Everything from like potato size to maybe the size of like the football, that kind of size. Thousands of these funny white stones. And we accidentally drove straight over one of them, and it cracked open, and it looked shiny inside. It looks kind of yellow and crystalline. And we went up to it, we measured it, and it was almost pure sulfur. And we have no idea how it got there. Not a clue. And the scientists are coming up, like they're now trying to pick apart. We spent as long as we could taking all the measurements our rover can of what are they like, where are they coming from, what's their elemental composition, what's their mineralogical composition, everything we can figure out about them. And we've taken all the measurements we can. We're now back on the road and we're heading ever upward. But the scientists are now trying to go through that to figure out where the hell did all this sulfur come from. We have no idea. And that's kind of awesome. Like 12 years into our mission.
It's comforting.
12 years in, we're still finding stuff that no one ever expected to find on Mars, which is kind of cool.
I am glad there's still some stuff we can't quite figure out. That is Lisa.
Yeah.
That's Tim's.
There's still some mysteries.
Thing. Yeah. That's good. It keeps you guessing, right? It'd be weird if we knew. You can't know everything. That takes the fun.
My takeaway is Mars smells like rotten eggs.
Doesn't smell great.
If we knew what was there, what would be the point in going in the first place?
Correct.
Because to
because
quote
cool.
George Mallory, because it's there.
Yeah.
Isn't that why we do these things? I'm just saying that's why we do these things. Because they're there.
All right. So we appreciate so much the time. And again, we could sit, the three of us could sit here and talk for hours on this.
Yeah, sorry, we've gone a little over. I know I told you.
We got a little over.
Yeah.
Yes. And sorry to the viewers at home. But hopefully it's been enlightening in some way. This has been Off Track with Hinch and Rossi. Off Track is part of the SiriusXM Sports Podcast Network. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, please give a 5-star rating and leave a review. Subscribe today wherever you stream your podcasts. We are at Ask Off Track on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to follow us on Twitter, we're at Hinchtown and at Alexander Rossi. If you want to follow Tim, though we have no idea why you would, he's at The Tim Durham on Twitter. Find us on YouTube and subscribe to our channel for exclusive video content. Off Track is produced by Tim Durham, and by that we mean Tim.